Welcome back to Allison Customs Project Car TV. I'm Jeff Allison, and thank you for watching. There you have it. One more version done. This one I'd already put the 90 on there. The next one, like I said, needs to be about 6 inches longer than this hose. And it actually gets the same thing, a 90 on one end and a straight on the other, but it goes to opposite ends this time, so it doesn't make any difference when you're making the hose. But anyway, I'm gonna turn you off and go cut some hose. And so I'm working on the intercooler supercharger hoses. And some of the quick disconnects came with the engine, and then we just had to get some preformed 90-degree hoses so that we could work our way down behind the alternator. The interesting thing is supercharger has 5/8 inch fittings. The intercooler has 3/4 inch fittings. The pump for the intercooler is 3/4 inch fittings, and then the tank we can put 3/4 or 5/8. So at least in one spot here, we've got to switch from a 5/8 inch hose to a 3/4 inch hose. And using a brass barbed fitting that does that. And then we're using these Gates hose clamps. And these will shrink, they say 1/8 of an inch. I think it's a little bit more. The trick is right now it fits on this hose really nice. If you go put this in the sun for 15 minutes, it will barely fit over here. It hasn't shrunk all it's going to, but like this one has been heat shrunk, you know, with the gun, and that sucker's on there, and it's very rigid now. But you do got to be careful with these Gates power clamps, or they're basically power grips rather. They're basically heat shrink that for a clamp. You've got to make sure you don't let them get in the sun, get warmed and heated up. So then the other thing I was going to show you, simple little trick here for putting these hoses together. Spray a little Windex on them, glass cleaner. It evaporates pretty rapidly, so you don't have to worry about it. And then the fitting slides right in. It's super easy. It'll also let you slide that power fitting up there. And if you can, you want just a little bit of overlap at the end of the hose for that power grip. So if you've got the room, and there's not a lot of room on this fitting, so we can't overhang it very much, but we want to put just a little edge of the heat shrink over the edge of the hose, so that you kind of get a nice finished fit there, and you don't see the end of the hose and the little string sticking out. So because they don't really cut them super square, and because we got to run another hose right up against this, we're not going to be able to do a whole lot of that on this one, but that's all there is to putting those on, as long as you never let them get warm. Once they've gotten warm, it can be a nightmare to get those things to go onto the hose, and then trying to get a fitting inside there. And these are a lot easier with the barbs than if you have one that has the bubble on the end, because now it has to expand the hose quite a bit to get over it. And the only way I figured out to do that is to pull the clamp material all the way to the far end. In fact, I'll just show you that here in a minute. Thought I'd show you one more thing here with these power grips. You're going to get them, and they come on this little cardboard roll, and occasionally you'll get one that'll slide off, but most of the time they won't. The best method I've found of getting them out is to take a pair of needle nose pliers and just kind of wrap that tube like you're twisting it, and you'll break it down enough, it'll twist out of there, and then it'll fit over the end of your hose and all that. So this hose has now got to go in the car. The 3/4 inch piece is already in the car and bolts to the bottom, or clamped to the bottom of the intercooler. So I got to make this connection in the car, and then from there heat that up and work on the next hose. All right, so here's the other type of fitting that I was talking about instead of the barb. It's where it's got to get enough light on that to where you can see it. It's got a raised area here, at the end, and every now and then, you know, and some of them that raised area will be just in here 1/4 of an inch or so. But that makes, instead of being able to really easily slip over that, the hose has to flex quite a bit. So what I've found with this type of fitting is shove the clamp on as far as you can first. Then get your Windex again, squirt everything up. Then when you start rolling this on, you're kind of doing two things at once. You're pushing the fitting all the way in and rolling that clamp back at the same time until you get all of it set. And then with these fittings, we want to be able to take that fitting loose later. So make sure you clock it the right direction. But once you get it on all the way, and then again, just leaving just a little bit of the heat shrink over the edge, that works for me as far as getting these hoses over that bubble. So I'm gonna go ahead and heat shrink this one now. And then this is a 5/8 inch hose all the way to the other end. Unfortunately, I need a 90 on both ends. So, and preformed 90 preferably. So I've got two long hoses that'll get one junction out in the middle somewhere. And then this is the return hose from the intercooler, or excuse me, from the supercharger back to the tank, and then gets pumped from the tank through the intercooler to the supercharger. So go ahead and get this heat shrunk and then get the other end on. Okay, so before I go ahead and get the next hose built, I decided we'd go ahead and install this one, at least loosely. So one of the things we need to do is put some anti-seize on those threads. I'm filming this with my phone, so apologize for the jumping around, but we got to get underneath the car here. So I'm gonna put a little bit of this. This is made by Russell, but it's an anti-seize thread sealant. There's a lot of brands out there and a lot of uses, or a lot of ones you could use. So this basically feels like grease when you're putting it on. And I've had really good luck with this particular brand. So let's go ahead and get this hose slid into place. This one, we need to put our 90 on the engine outlet fitting. We'll roll it up under there like that. Slide all the way back. Focus way down there. There we go. So you can kind of see it hanging there. And it's got to go all the way along there and come over to the oil cooler. And then the one we got to make next is that 90. So that it's going into the top of this oil cooler up here. And then that 90 will come up right next to it and go back to the block that I'll show you underneath the car. And hopefully you can see that. This is our oil adapter. The stock engine would have had an oil filter here. Not oil filter, but an oil cooler that mounted to the side of the oil pan and block. Would not really fit with all of our exhaust and everything else. So it's one of the first things that we figured out was going to have to be rerouted into a different system, or a different method. So that's how that one out. And then you can see this other one a little higher up. That one is so this smaller line on the top goes to our AccuSump, which is an oil accumulator. So if you've got high cornering G's or something like that, it will pump oil quickly into the system if it detects a low oil pressure. And then as soon as your oil pressure comes back, it reclaims the oil. And it holds, I believe, up to 3 quarts. Also, you can use it with a electric switch where you just turn it on and off. And if the car's been sitting for a while, you basically can pre-lube the engine if you haven't, to get the oil flow up, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So anyway, that's that. This other fitting here is the second hose we're going to make. Then it goes over to the oil cooler, and then the oil cooler is plumbed, and we can put in the last bracket. Now, So we're looking down, looking down through the top of the radiator core support, and we've got the bracket in back over there. So that brace is now in, and then the hoses actually go through it and put that 90, that was the second hose we made with that 90 on it there. So all that's tight. And then we come around over here. I got a little bit of slack in there right now that as I install the rest of the stuff, that'll kind of get used up. And they go back underneath and underneath the car where we were earlier. So on this side still, I need to finish plumbing the intercooler supercharger pump. So I've got it plumbed to the reservoir, and then I just got to come off that hose nipple there, come around, and we've got to plumb in the supercharger, and then plumb in the intercooler, and then plumb in the supercharger up here. And that's just kind of sitting there just to see if those hoses work. So that's my next setup, is to get that plumbed in, and then I can test that system and probably start adding some fluids. We got to get the air, get this tank mounted back up over here where it goes. That's the power steering reservoir, and I've just got it pulled up out of the way right now, but we'll get that put back in and get our air filter and mass airflow sensor and all that stuff installed. So I think we'll get it all plumbed up, at least up front here today, except possibly we're waiting on a very specific heater hose, and I've got to do the air conditioning yet. So got a few things still to go here. Let's see, you can see the air conditioner lines there. Got one done, but I still need to bring this one in, get the binary switch and all that stuff in. So get on that, get back with you guys. Hoping you guys can see that line right there, that steel. It's a stainless steel line. It's actually a GM line, and it's a drain back out of the evap system. It drains, this is an oil separator, and then we added this one in line as well, and this one drains oil back to the oil pan. So we had a portion of that line. We had a whole line that went to the stock oil pan, but of course with the, you can see it in there. There you go. So with the Holley oil pan, that line would not fit and had nowhere to go. So I had to cut it off, and then we dipped down and had somebody who could get us a fitting. So this line right here, I've put a 90 on it now, just kind of planning out my hose. So with that 90, kind of planning out my hose routing, and it'll come underneath the motor mount there, and then end up at this dash 10 nipple here. That will give us our drain back to the oil pan with this Holley oil pan. But the stock line wouldn't work, so I took that stainless steel line in after I cut it and got basically the shape I wanted, and had a dash 10 male nipple silver soldered onto the end of it. Additionally, we had to do basically the same thing here. Get a view back far enough. So this line goes up, and it goes into the bottom of the water pump. And this line used to go to the stock oil cooler and was just to run water through a water to oil heat exchanger. So again, we cut it off, had a nipple silver soldered on, and made a new bracket. That needs to get painted yet. And then we've got it set up to go to a dash 10 hose. Then that has to get plumbed into the bottom of the radiator, or the lower radiator hose. So I'm still working on that idea. What I think is going to work is I've got this Marasso part that should go in the bottom lower, or the lower radiator hose vertically, and then I can bring in that dash 10 hose into this fitting. So I think I've got a plan on how I'm going to accomplish this task, but that's it's probably for tomorrow at this point. I'd hope to finish all the hoses today and all the lines, so you guys would have a great finish to part 2. But I'm still going to have a few things left. Today I'm continuing on with the heater hoses. This is actually, I think, going to finish us up for hoses. I take that back. We do have one more air conditioning hose to build. We're waiting on a manifold that should actually show up today, FedEx or UPS. Anyway, so we had worked out something, but there's actually a third port on this water pump. So ended up just going in and doing a little research, and pretty much what I found was that you basically need to start with a factory set of hoses, and then from that work into whatever setup you're gonna run. So in our case, we'll tie it into our vintage air system. And part of the reason for this is just the crazy angles that some of these hoses are coming out at, and the fact that we have 3 and 2 of them needed to be tied together, so we needed all these quick disconnects and a Y, and they're different sizes. So the thinking is here, we're going to plug this end into the backside of our water pump, and then here where it says made in Mexico and has all this, somewhere in here, maybe at this Y or further up here, we will junction this off into the hoses that actually go over to the vintage air unit. So that's my plan for today, is to figure out how much of these I need. I know it's going to be at least somewhere up in here to get all these curves and around all the different pieces, and then we can work from that into our heater hose system and get the for example, we have part of the vintage air is to have this valve that turns the water on to go to and from the vintage air unit. So this hose, which I have right now plugged into the hot water heater, that needs to go away. That valve will get put in line here somewhere, but this valve gets hidden behind the fender right up here at the top. So kind of got to work all these pieces in and then get everything plugged together. So there you go. That's my project, and I'll probably just bring you back after I'm done, because trying to film in this little tight area is nearly impossible. I'll move the camera and see if we get anything out of it, but don't be surprised if you see me just cut this and come back. The good news is most of it is now complete as far as the planning, and I just got to do the execution. So I've got those hoses from earlier, and they'll plug in on these fittings. They're actually made to go on the 90s, but I think I'm going to end up using the straight fitting sides and then just changing the hose out, but that'll give me the quick connect and I can get to these other lines. So we'll see what's going to work best there. Obviously a 45 would work really nice, but I think the straights and maybe the best option. So anyway, that's going to finish up part 2 of the hoses, and I'm not going to do a part 3. You guys get the idea of what it's taking to get all these done, and I've shown you a couple different types of hoses we're making. So I'm going to knock these out and get this video posted so you guys will have something to see tomorrow morning. So again, thanks for following. You guys have a great day. We'll see you. There's one more thing. This just showed up with UPS. It's the manifold that goes to the AC compressor, so that converts those to AN type fittings. Actually, those look like O-ring fittings. Well, I'll have to check, but yeah, I'm pretty sure those actually are O-ring fittings rather than AN fittings. But that just, the O-rings go on there on each side, and then that bolts to the compressor, and then that makes this manifold a fitting that I, either way I have both types. So that just showed up. So we'll get the AC lines finished tomorrow too. It goes way down there at the bottom on the compressor, way under there. So it's way back under there where the compressor's at. You can kind of see the front of the compressor there. So just thought I'd add that in. One more thing to get finished up tomorrow, and hopefully we'll get this thing fired in the next day or two. So, well, maybe by Monday night. So if I do, or when I do, I'll post a quick shot of that too. Have a great weekend. We'll see you.
Thanks for watching Allison Customs Project Car TV. Like us on Facebook and check us out at AllisonCustomsOnline.com.